Two NFL games.
Who?
2 NFL, but I forget.
Who's playing? Okay. Hi, good evening. Hey, welcome to the August 11th, 2022 meeting of Xenia City Council. At this time, we will have an invocation led by Associate Pastor Tristan Ferry of New Community Church on Old Springfield Pike. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by myself. So if you can all please rise.
Cool. Do I pray into this mic? Is that how this works?
Yes, sir.
That's very
Thank you.
cool. Yeah. Never been here before. This is fun. Lord, we just thank you so much for the opportunity to come before you. It's 6 p.m. on a Thursday, and inevitably, after a long day, a lot of us are bringing a lot of stuff in here, just mentally, physically, both personal and professional. I know that this is kind of another hat that so many of these people wear, in addition to all the other things that they're doing. So wherever people are at, Lord, spiritually in relationship to you, in relationship to this meeting, mentally they might not be here yet. I just pray for them. I pray, Lord, that the work that they're doing tonight, talking about hunting and chickens and all the good stuff, Lord, these people get to talk about those things, and they affect so many people. So I just pray that you give them joyful hearts to serve in this capacity. We pray for the flourishing of Xenia. I know that everyone in this room is here because they care that Xenia would thrive and flourish, and Lord, we need your help. We pray that you would bless every effort of this council. Pray that you would align hearts and minds toward the betterment of this community, of which I'm gratefully a part. We love you, Lord. We pray all this in the name of your Son. Amen.
Cool. All right, thank you. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, Pastor Ferry. And at this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call, please.
Vice President Urschel.
Here.
Councilman Scrivens.
Here.
Councilwoman Dean. Here. Councilman Branham.
Here.
Councilman Dean. Mayor Mays. Here. President Smith.
Here. I'd like to motion to excuse Councilman Dean tonight due to family obligation. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by the Vice President. Any discussion?
Apparently I didn't get invited.
I wondered.
What's wrong?
All right. Thank you very much.
It wouldn't even surprise me.
All right, that's awesome. All right, we'll ask for a roll call, please.
Vice President Urschel.
Aye.
Councilman Scrivens.
Aye.
Councilwoman Dean.
Aye.
Councilman Branham.
Aye.
Mayor Mays.
Aye.
President Smith.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the approval of minutes from our July 28th, 2022 regular meeting. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes, please?
So moved.
Moved by Councilwoman Dean. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilman Branham. Any additions, corrections, or notations necessary for the meeting minutes? All right, not seeing any. Can I get a roll call to accept, please?
Vice President Urschel.
Aye.
Councilman Scrivens.
Aye.
Councilwoman Dean.
Aye.
Councilman Branham.
Aye.
Mayor Mays.
Aye.
President Smith.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is opportunity for special presentations. We actually have none scheduled for tonight, so we'll be moving on to audience comments. This is the opportunity in the meeting for tonight for anyone in the audience that would care to come to the podium. Limit your comments 3 to 4 minutes. Give us your name and address for the record. All right, seeing no one come forward, I do have some emails that we felt were necessary or as a courtesy to those that have emailed to read these into the minutes. One is from Peggy Lindsay, 227 East Church Street. Saw a news story this morning. City Council is considering a change to the livestock ordinance at tonight's meeting. While I don't oppose changing the number of animals from 4 to 6 to be in line with Ohio code, I would like to make council aware that even households with a few chickens can create some issues for their neighbors, especially odor. My next door neighbor kept a few chickens for several years in warm weather especially. We experienced many days where we could not enjoy sitting in our backyard because of the stench from their yard. So they seem to only clean the coops at the beginning of the week, so at the end of the weekend there was an issue. Fortunately, my neighbors have gotten rid of chickens. I can't imagine I'm the only homeowner who might experience this issue. If it's possible to add something to the code establishing requirements for frequency of cleaning, that would ensure a family's desire to own backyard chickens would not result in another family's inability to enjoy their backyard, I would believe it would be an improvement for all parties. And in a second email, Ms. Lindsay also wanted to thank whoever is responsible for getting the sidewalk extended on Weaver Street at Shawnee Park. We walk our dogs multiple times a day, and especially in messy weather, it is an absolute joy not to have to choose to either walk in wet grass or risk walking in the road. So we hope for that for years, and we are so glad it finally happened. So that was forwarded to public service as well, I do believe. So I'd like to thank our city clerk for those 2 emails. And next on our agenda is opportunity for old business. Our first item is, and only item in old business, is Ordinance 2022-26, which is also a public hearing tonight. This is amending section 1062.10 titled Hunting and Fishing of the Xenia City Code. This was introduced by Councilman Scrivens at our previous meeting.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to move for passage of ordinance 2022-26.
All right, thank you very much. Move for passage, and do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by the mayor. So what I'd like to do at this time is open the public hearing on this item and ask anyone in the audience tonight if they would like to come to the podium and speak either for or against. All right. See no one come forward, I'm going to close the public hearing, but invite any comments from council at this time. All right, and this is for those that are watching that might not have an agenda. This is regarding experiencing issues with net fishing at Shawnee Park, and that will be prohibited 30 days after this goes in effect, or immediately?
Yes, it will be effective on September 10th.
But technically, they're not allowed to do
Technically, you
it
can't do
now.
it now, it's
Yeah.
posted.
Okay.
And the city manager has the authority to make and post those types of regulations, but
Got it.
we're just having you put it in to formally.
Yep, little housekeeping measure. All right, so at this time, I do have a motion by Councilman Scrivens and a second by the mayor. Any other comments from council regarding this? All right, can I get a roll call, please?
Vice President Urschel,
Aye.
Councilman Scrivens,
Aye.
Councilwoman Dean,
Aye.
Councilman Branham,
Aye.
Mayor Mays.
Aye.
President Smith.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is new business. Our first item in new business is an emergency. This is ordinance 2022-27. This is amending ordinance 2022-17 to provide appropriations for current expenses and expenditures for the city of Xenia for the fiscal year ending in December 31st of 2022. Mr. Finance Director.
Thank you, Council President. We're requesting an additional appropriation this evening for one purpose. When a contractor is going to do some work in the roadway, like for example install a sewer lateral, and they're going to disturb the roadway, they're required to make a deposit to ensure that after the fact they restore the roadway to an appropriate condition. When we budget for that, we budget the revenue as the deposit as a revenue, and then the refund back to the contractor once it's been verified that they've restored the road as an expenditure. We've had a few more requests or deposits that have been made for these street opening charges this year, and so we're coming back to council this evening requesting an additional appropriation of $10,000 so that we can properly refund those deposits to contractors who have done the appropriate work. So there's not an additional expenditure of actual city funds here that we're requesting, rather just an appropriation so that we can properly refund the dollars that have been deposited.
All right, thank you, Mr. Duke. Any questions for our Finance Director tonight? All right. All right, and at this time, I will seek a motion to approve as an emergency.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Branham, and I need a second, please.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Scribbins. Any further discussion? All right, this is an emergency. It'll take 5 votes to pass. At this time, I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Vice President Urschel.
Aye.
Councilman Scribbins.
Aye.
Councilwoman Dean.
Aye.
Councilman Branham.
Aye.
Mayor Mays.
Aye.
President Smith.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Our next item is title and introduction on Ordinance 2022-28. This is renumbering and amending chapters 234, 238, and 240, amending chapter 242, and then enacting chapter 243 of the Administrative Code as contained in Part 2 of City Government, Title 6, the Administrative Code for the City of Xenia. Madam Law Director, could you please explain?
Yes, thank you. This is the start of the process. We warned you this was coming. Staff is working on a rewrite of the city's administrative code. There are currently departments and divisions that we have on the books that we're not utilizing. There's ones that we have that aren't on the books. Most of what we have in the administrative code, the last updates I could find were in the 90s. So this is part of staff's goal to work smarter, not harder, get things streamlined. We are starting with the public safety chapter. This was reviewed with the legislative review committee at the second meeting of last month. What we are recommending for the Department of Public Safety, you currently have that on the books. We want to renumber it. Part of the goal you'll see as we go forward with the administrative code is to have each department end in a 0, 240, 250, and then the divisions under those departments would be numbered accordingly. So you currently have a Department of Public Safety. We're simply updating the provisions of that. We wanted to add language clarifying that the Public Safety Director is responsible for the security of all city facilities and the security of the public at those facilities. We are creating the position of Assistant Public Safety Director. There's no intent to fill that position at this time, but we wanted to go ahead and put that on the books. Per the charter, the city manager automatically serves as the Public Safety Director. So if at such time, Brent has so much on his plate already, that if he would need that position, it's there. We would have to come back to council for you to authorize actually filling that. But we did want to go ahead and take the opportunity to put that on the books. We also added a section that the Public Safety Director is authorized to create any federal or state required emergency preparedness plans. That's subject to council appropriating money to do the same. We currently have a police division on the books, so we went through and updated and clarified their chapters. Well, there are some requirements as far as original appointments, criminal background checks in the Ohio Revised Code that we wanted to get added to this chapter. We also recognized the 2 assistant police chief positions that we currently have. We are calling them majors, but they are assistants to the chief. We also added language to authorize a police cadet program. We are keeping the reserve officer program. And then we did add language, if you reviewed this and you saw the very big section on the Volunteer Peace Officers Dependents Fund Board. Let me just explain briefly what that is. Reserve officers are considered volunteer officers under the ORC. Because they are not eligible to participate in the Ohio Police and Fire Pension Fund, the state has this system where if a volunteer officer is injured or killed in the line of duty, their dependents can make application to the local board for money. The local board then sends that up to the state, and if approved by the local board, the state will make a payment. So because we have a reserve program, it's possible we may have to have that volunteer board. Now, right now, under the statute, if you are a retired police officer, you've retired from Ohio Police and Fire, you're not considered a volunteer because you are drawing that pension. All of our reserve officers right now, it's my understanding, are retired police officers. So we don't even have enough reserve officers that could serve on this board. You have to have at least 2. So if we hit the point that we ever get reserve officers who are not retired, then that provision regarding the volunteer board may kick in. And Cody has a question.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud.
That's why this is on the books. It's not something that we think we're going to need right now, but we may at some point in the future need it because we do have a reserve officer program. We are changing the title of the fire division. Their chapter was actually updated when we did the EMS billing. We are changing fire division to fire and EMS division. And we are formally recognizing the charter authorized position of assistant chief, which we call the deputy chief. We are also creating, which we do not have on the books now, an emergency communications division. We tend to call it dispatch. It's also known as the Xenia Green Central Communications Center. But we did want to formally put that emergency communication division on the books. For the law department chapter, there were no substantive changes being made to that, just renumbering it. Again, as I said, the law department is one chapter. There aren't any divisions. There aren't going to be any divisions. So in order to kind of save space, we're putting law department in at 245 rather than a 0. But that leaves enough space for the city manager's departments, finance, and then public service when we get to that. And I will turn it over to the public safety director if he has anything he wants to add.
Yeah, just to reinforce maybe a couple points. Again, as the law director pointed out, we're trying to bring contemporary provisions to our code to align with ORC and our current operational structure. In particular with the fire and what will now be the fire and EMS division, we're trying to be more reflective of their actual service delivery. So in conjunction with this, we'll be updating their logo. So it's not just the Xenia Fire Division, but Xenia Fire EMS. The communications operation, as we have known it, has evolved as a call-taking service from the police division that started in the 50s and 60s, and then in the 70s with the advent of 911. The service has continued to expand really over recent years exponentially with the enhanced 911 services and all the requirements, both national and federal, related to these services. So we felt it was appropriate that these services no longer fall under the police division, but under their own title, their own division, and elevate the status of that operation, given that it is a distinct component of our public safety service delivery system. So again, we've covered a lot of these changes from an operational standpoint with the Public Safety Committee, the legislative changes in principle with the Legislative Review Committee, and I think we've had some general discussion with council, so none of this is, I think, coming as a surprise, but this is the first in several phases of legislative updates to our department and division chapters that we'll be coming back to council with.
All right, thank you very much.
And just again to reiterate for the public, none of these changes means an increase in cost. It's the same positions we already have. We are changing some of the titles. We did add the position of Assistant Public Safety Director, but there is no intent to fill that at this time. So there's no real budgetary impact from these changes.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions for the law director?
Sure, Mr. President. This may go to our finance director, and feel free to defer to him if you'd like to do that. So as we're putting a section here for the fee section, and it's very specific in terms of specific fees and mileage charges and those types of things. And I could see where for many years we're in a very static financial situation as a country.
Oh, the court fees you're
Well, the
referring
court
to.
fees and the mileage fees for transport with our law division, those kind of things. Do we anticipate that, we're at 10% inflation now, who knows where we're gonna be next year, right?
Well, let me address that for you if I can, and I apologize, I should have during the presentation. The court fees only kick on under operation of state law. all our police officers are automatically bailiffs of the Xenia Municipal Court.
Right.
Automatically, they serve in that position. If the Xenia Municipal Court would ever ask our police division, we need you to go serve a summons.
Correct.
We need you to go serve this writ of eviction. We need you to go do this. That's what those fees are for. They're specifically for when our officers would act as a bailiff of the court.
Right.
They're authorized under statute, since our police would be doing services for the court. The court is to charge that fee and collect it. The fees that are set in the ordinance are exactly the same fees that the county sheriff gets. And by operation of law, that's what they have to be. We're not allowed to set them higher than what the county sheriff gets.
So are those static for the county sheriff as well? But are they in the, where are those in the ORC, or are those in a?
They're in the ORC, yes, sir.
So this is a reflection of the ORC fees?
Yes, yes. Those fees are set in the ORC. To my knowledge, and Chief Stutes can correct me if I'm wrong, but our officers have not served as bailiffs. The court is staffed enough that they haven't had that problem. However, part of the reason we wanted to go ahead and put the fees in there,
right.
We just went through and are still in a pandemic. If all the bailiffs are down and the court needs service made, they're gonna call our police to do it.
Right.
If we don't have this on the books, it's gonna be too late to go back and try and add it.
Sure, yeah.
So it's not something that we see we're probably going to use a lot, but it's there if we need it.
Okay. So if in the future the state legislature modifies the sheriff's fee structure, we
Yes.
could also modify our fee structure
Yes.
too? Okay.
Mr. President,
Yes.
to the broader question, Councilman, as to fees, we typically, in the first quarter of a year, will solicit input from department division heads looking at fee structures for a whole range of services.
Right.
And make adjustments. We've not done that too much this year. We'll be coming back to council later, probably this year, to talk about utility fee structures and so forth. Because to your point, costs continue to change, and it's on the city services, the impact as well. So, to the broader question of fees, yeah, we'll be looking at that coming into the fall and then after the first of the year as well.
Sure. Okay. Well, it's good to know that these are tied to a fee structure that we really have no control over. But if that's modified, we could reflect in our code. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Real quick question. Who is our two reserve officers? Barker and?
Harbor Master.
Okay, so we do have two then. So would that mean that we need to set up that committee then?
Because they're retired.
Oh, okay.
Right.
All right.
And we do, not frequently, but occasionally enlist the services of the reserve program. If we have a dignitary or a candidate for national office that would roll through, if we had a natural disaster, perhaps major events, there are occasions where we'll enact their services, and it's a good service to have. And almost exclusively, we're using folks who have retired from Xenia Police Division.
All right, thank you. Did you have a question, Councilman Scrubbins?
Thank you, Mr. President. Madam Law Director, under 240.05, emergency preparedness, are we going to specify an emergency operations center, or is that something we can break out like 051 or 052? I mean, it's nice to be prepared for an emergency, but I mean, where's the center of activity?
Yeah, I can maybe answer that. So under these provisions, we're charged with the authority and responsibility to promulgate plans pursuant to whatever local standards or state requirements that we have. So our emergency operations plan would stipulate the locations that we have identified as emergency operations centers, and those would be locations that would meet enhanced building code for essential facilities, facilities that we have pre-engineered to have the communications capabilities. So we operate essentially, or have designated 3 facilities as our EOC capable locations. One is this facility, one is Station 31 in the training room, and then our primary one is actually the basement at 101. We can convert the roll call room and have the capability to literally plug and go with phones and computers, and have the ability to convert that room in about 60 minutes to an operating EOC. So we do most of that administratively through the plan process.
Very good. Also, Mr. President, Madam Law Director, directing your attention to 245.01, establishment of the Law Department, and 02, the Law Director. I've noticed there's no assistant director. All the other departments and services that we have at least 2 people. This Law Director only has 1 person. Could you explain that, please?
We just haven't made the decision to add an assistant position. It's not authorized in the charter at this time, the way the assistant city manager and assistant finance director are. If we hit the point that I need that filled, I will come back to you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Fisher?
Yes, Mr. President, I have one additional one. So, can you speak to the Citizens Reward Program and whether that's in existence today or is that a potential in the future? That's the 241.11, where it talks about if the city's received notice that a Citizens Reward Program has been established by the Board of County Commissioners under ORC 9.92, that talks about our obligations under that. I don't know.
Which section are you on?
241.11.
241.11.
Page 14.
241.11.
Page 14.
Yes. There is a process set forth under the Ohio Revised Code, and it's referenced the 298111. Property that is in the control of the police division that either has been abandoned or found or it's been ordered confiscated by the court, there's a statutory process we have to follow to dispose of that property. We have to file a motion with the court. We have to get the court's permission to sell it, destroy it, whatever the PD is allowed under statute to do with that. What this states is, and it was kind of put here just as a reminder, if Greene County establishes a citizen rewards program, when we dispose of any of that property, we do an internet auction, we have a in-public auction, however we do it, 25% of the proceeds of that is to go to that citizen rewards program. So say we had 100 bikes that's in the PD's possession, they were abandoned, nobody ever came to claim them, we file with the court to dispose of those bikes, we sell them by internet auction, we make $1,000. If Greene County has established a citizens reward program, then 25% of that $1,000 is to go to Greene County to help fund that program. Every police division in Greene County would pay into that fund.
And so that's a requirement by the ORC to us if the county commissioners have established that program.
Yes, every police division in Greene County is required to follow that statutory process to dispose of properties, so they're all subject to that.
Right.
So Greene County can put money in, and then all the local PDs would be submitting as well.
But
it's nothing out of the general fund.
No, I understand. But to my knowledge, they have not established that at this point, have they?
I don't believe they've started one.
Right.
But if they ever would, then we would have to pay 25% of when we have a bike sale.
Right. Okay. Do you have a sense of, maybe I should ask our finance director this, on average, how much might we do in a year of disposal of property?
I don't want to take a guess. It really varies from year to year. I mean, there have been some years where we've had things that are a little more valuable than others, but it's never really a meaningful amount. I mean, from an operations standpoint.
And I can tell you this year it would actually be substantively more than in prior years because we've made a very concerted effort to clean out evidence storage and other collected articles from the police division and other categories of materials that we've been trying to get rid of. So. But when I say substantively more, that's by comparison. It's still not a lot of revenue.
So at this point, that revenue goes back to us 100%. But if this was established, a quarter of that would go to the county program. Okay.
Yes, state law says that money is to go back into the general fund. When we have such a sale, it goes to the general fund. If Greene County ever establishes a citizen reward program, then we would pay 25% of that to help fund that program.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, great. Any other questions? All right, who would like to introduce? Introduced by the mayor. Thank you. Moving on, next item is also an introduction. This is item 2022-29. This is amending sections 29801 and 29801 of the city's fee schedule. Sections 1220, 1220, 1224. Oh, 1220, I'm sorry, B, C, B10, 9E, 122401E, 9B, 122401E9, 122401E, 19, 122602C, 123606K, 123609E, and 122404 of our land development code. Sorry, I kind of butchered that up there a little bit. So at this time, I'm going to turn the floor over to our city manager to explain.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I want to spend a little more time than I would on a typical introduction because there are a lot of elements here. So I just want to touch on each of these just briefly for council's consideration of introduction of this. So again, this is pertaining to our land changes to our proposed changes to our land development code. Originally approved in 2016 after a very comprehensive community-based process. Was this land development code, which is a portion of our codified ordinances intended to establish community standards for the development, use, and general care of real property and improvements thereon throughout our city. Over time, and as our community norms and consumer preferences and economic conditions have evolved, it does become necessary to consider updates to elements within our land development code. So the code might continue to be reflective of expectations in our community today. Our city planner has engaged with our Planning and Zoning Commission on possibilities for some updates to the land development code to address certain recurring issues or otherwise to improve how the code is written for the benefit of our citizens, both our residential citizens as well as our corporate citizens. And so we are presenting some proposed changes this evening that we'd like council to take consideration of. So I want to just kind of briefly note these different sections of changes and what the topics are. First, updates to sections 1220.01B and C are necessary to bring the land development code consistent with recent voter-approved charter changes, most notably amending the necessary quorum for decision making, so that's just aligning with these charter changes. Updates to section 1224.01 B10 would remove existing unnecessary language that requires accessory buildings less than 10 feet from principal building to be protected with a fire-resistant material and follow the same yard requirements as the principal building. Updating section 1224.01E9B would provide an exemption that allows fences in a right-of-way if they are part of an outdoor seating area authorized by the city via a right-of-way use agreement. Updates to 1224.01E9F would address the most common variance request received by the city, that being construction of fences taller than 4 feet on a corner lot between a home and a street. These requests often involve fences in what the property owner views as a side yard, but technically we would define them as a second front yard. The amendment would allow fences to exceed 4 feet if they are located in these second front yards, provided they comply with the required front yard setback. Updating section 1224.01E19 would alter limits to small livestock on properties less than 5 acres to a quantity of 6. ORC requires retailers to sell poultry in lots not less than 6. We feel this is a common sense change to be reflective of what the ORC is doing. This particular one's gotten some media attention, so we've had some questions, but generally I think people are just not quite understanding, the quantity of change. Updates to section 1226.02C would clarify language and standards related to vision clearance. Updates to section 1234.02B3A would address a loophole in the current code language regarding temporary parking for recreational vehicles. Updates to section 1236.06K as presented would exempt digital signs from the proportional area limit. The current language did not necessarily anticipate the rapid transition of retail signage to electronic signs from the large removable type lettering that we've all been used to historically. Current code language was intended to limit the size of the latter of those, the large removable type, for aesthetic purposes, but we recognize that with the change to the digital signs that we can be more flexible with this. Updating 1236.09E would allow for restaurants to install a secondary drive-through sign of up to 12 square feet in a stacking lane. What are known as pre-browse menu boards are popular today for drive-through services and allow additional menu and promotional information for customers, and we feel it would help customers in their ordering choices and reduce some of the queuing in the lines without necessarily adverse visual impacts to those particular properties. And finally, updates to 1242.04 reinspection fees. If approved, would add a reinspection fee authorizing authority, the authority to issue that reinspection fee for zoning matters, such as what is currently allowed in our property maintenance code provisions. The reinspection fee, which is currently set at $150 for vegetation violations and $100 for non-vegetation violations, is invoiced to a property owner who fails to comply with a notice of violation by the deadline in the notice. Repeated unaddressed notices can result in repeated fees. This tool has proven to be effective as an alternative to lengthy and usually unsuccessful court procedures. So we think the reinspection fee alone is used with these the reinspection fee alone is used with violations that the city cannot abate on our own. All land development code violations currently fall under this category, as the land development code does not provide authority to the code enforcement officer to abate violations and charge costs to the property owner. Many of our land development code violations are also of a nature that precludes abatement by the city. Given that staff's proposing setting the land development code reinspection fee at $150 to increase the current non-vegetation property maintenance code reinspection fee to $150 to match the vegetation reinspection fee. And I know that's a lot. There's quite a bit of detail in the agenda report, but we are looking to add this additional fee structure to these zoning related issues to mirror what we're doing with property maintenance issues, because it's frankly just hard to get these violations adjudicated through the court process. So we're looking for a means by which we can hopefully ensure more compliance with these issues, as we found that we're getting more compliance on the property maintenance matters with this type of fee structure. So staff is introducing the amendments to the ordinances this evening, which really are intended to bring these standards in line with contemporary conditions in the community, and in many cases these are providing more flexibility for property owners, and hoping to reduce some of the repeated issues that we see that come before planning and zoning. So again, our city planner is here this evening. He can answer any specific questions, but we're looking for introduction. I think as you're considering this, over the next 2 weeks, I would encourage you to reach out to Brian if you've got concerns. I'm sure he'd like to discuss it in more detail. So with that, we're recommending introduction this evening.
Thank you very much. All right, any questions for either Mr. Merriman or Mr. Forshner tonight? Councilman Scrivens?
Thanks, Mr. President. Mr. City Manager, I didn't hear you speak on number 7, 1234.02B3A, temporary parking of recreational vehicles and trailers. I noticed you did not stipulate anything.
Yeah, I referenced it here without giving, because there's quite a bit of narrative in the agenda report. I'm going to defer to Mr. Forshner, but I will say before he takes the mic that this is one of those recurring issues that we've had repeatedly, that our code enforcement office deals with quite a bit. So Brian, do you want to speak to that one?
Yeah, currently our regulations allow parking of recreational vehicles and trailers, boats, the like, on residential property in residential district, only if it is in the side yard or the rear yard on a paved surface. But we do have a provision in the code that allows temporary parking on the front driveway of up to 7 days. The problem with that is that with the 7-day provision, it essentially becomes a loophole that allows people to keep these vehicles there permanently, because we're not here on the weekends to enforce the code, and people will park all week for 5 days and claim that they took it out for the weekend and bring it back, and it leads to inevitable longer term storage of these. So what we're proposing is that in order to make this more enforceable, that we reduce that temporary storage allowance to 3 days, which we think still allows adequate time for loading and unloading purposes, which is really the purpose of that time period, that we allow them to park it in a non-compliant location, they can still park it in the side or rear yard permanently if they want to, if it's on a paved surface. But just in that front area, we're changing that temporary parking period from 7 to 3 days.
Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
Mr. City Planner, I noticed this didn't speak to automobiles. I see a lot of automobiles parked in front yards, side yards.
Oh, in the grass?
And it's not, and it's not on a paved surface.
Well, no, that's already covered in our land development code, and that's actually a good example of something that this reinspection fee will help address.
Okay.
Because that is something that we currently enforce when people have their vehicles parked in the grass, including regular automobiles. We don't allow that, and it's a challenge to enforce because we can direct somebody not to do it. We can send a letter. Taking that person to court is going to be a realistic solution for dealing with what can be very easily addressed. A reinspection fee or an indication that you will receive a reinspection fee, it could be an effective middle ground on getting people to comply and move their vehicles off the grass.
Now, could drop stone be substituted for actual pavement?
No, it'd have to be, for driveways, we allow concrete or asphalt. In some exceptions, we can allow pavers, but not gravel. We don't allow gravel.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right, thank you
Can I
very
ask one
much.
to Brian as well?
Yeah.
So Brian, so when we say reinspection fee, that is, we've done an inspection, we found a violation, we've notified you, and there will be a time period that you can correct. And if you haven't corrected and we have to go back out and re-inspect and identify the violation again, we now can charge you a fee at that point? Is that how that works?
That's exactly right.
Okay. And if we have to come out a second or a third time, every one of those times, we can assign a fee to that.
Theoretically, yes. The way we plan to implement this and the way we've tweaked it is that we would do that perhaps a handful of times, after which we would pursue court action.
Right. And how are those fees collected then?
An invoice is sent to the property owner.
Okay.
It is not a fee that we can assess to property taxes though. Like with mowings and things where we're actually abating violations.
Correct.
Mowing
We'll do
the
the
property,
abatement,
cleaning up trash. We can assess those property taxes, but just a reinspection fee, we're not allowed to do that. The auditor will not let us. So if it goes unpaid, the recourse for collecting that is currently going through the court system. So if we have 3 or 5 reinspection fees piled up, that's part of what we would take the person to court for, is payment of those fees plus correction of the violation and whatever remedies the court decides.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. President.
Yeah, so if you could, hold on. I just have one question
Yep, go ahead.
before I forget. Can you define trailer in this? Because to me, there's 2 types of trailers. There's a tractor trailer, and then there's like a lawnmower trailer. So is there any difference in this?
No, it would apply to all types of trailers. Now, we do define, we do have a separate set of regulations for commercial vehicles, which are going to be more of your actual trucks, like large food truck sized vehicles, but it could be any type of trailer.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'm sorry, thank you.
That's right. I just wanted to draw on the fact that we had quite a bit of conversation with council earlier this summer. We did the walking tour with Brian. We talked about a lot of these challenges. So this is follow up to some of that conversation as we look for additional tools to try to address these conditions in neighborhoods where we do get frequent complaints. And again, it's a challenge for us to try to adjudicate things through the court. It's just not an effective means of bringing a situation to compliance, as we talked about on that walking tour. So I think between the law director, my office, planning department, we feel like this is a good approach, some good middle ground, as Brian suggested, that's keeping these things out of the court process, but looking for a means to to bring some accountability. So I think it's one of those that we can, if council's willing to approve this, we try it, we see how it works. If it's effective, we continue to do it. If not, we go back to the drawing board.
Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
How did the amount of the reinspection fee get determined?
Well, we originally looked at roughly, the value of the amount of time that we spend on, issuing a notice, going back out and re-inspecting it, And that was kind of the basis for coming up with that value. Realistically, with inflation and other things, I don't think it completely recoups the amount of time that we spend on these violations. But it's just an effort to strike a reasonable balance to maybe recoup some of those costs, but also be something that's realistic and reasonable and fair to the community. The $150 is what we currently charge for the vegetation violation. So if we mow a property, we charge the contractor's cost plus the $150 fee, and we're just suggesting that we make all the reinspection fees uniform with that.
All right, thank you. Does that answer your question?
It was an answer, yes.
All right, thank you. Any other comments?
Just one other question. So Brian, if someone has abated and there's been a violation, and we go back out also to reinspect it to identify that would there be $150 fee to identify that the abatement had occurred and that the violation no longer exists?
No, I mean, typically if say with the mowing, we notify because of the violation, we go out and we mow it. Yeah, we don't charge for re-inspecting to come out and make sure that that property.
But to that extent, though, we typically, I mean, a lot of times we're doing the abatement ourselves, right?
Yeah, we're paying the contractor.
We're paying the contractor, and we know it's been abated at that point, and we add the $150 fee because we know the abatement has happened. With the land development code, we don't do the abatement. The city does.
Correct.
Correct.
That's
So
correct.
let's say there's a initial violation, we issue a letter, to go out and do the second time, we issue the fee, right? And there's been a violation, then we get notice from the property owner that they have abated. I'm assuming we're gonna go back out and inspect to identify that abatement has occurred. Is there a fee associated with that?
No, the fee and the way it's worded in the code is that when there's a failure of a property owner to comply with the notice of violation, that fee is assessed.
Okay.
So us going, back out when they have complied is not going to fall under.
Is not, okay, all right.
And I would add that there are already sections of the property maintenance code and violations that we cannot abate under that as well.
Correct.
That we already use this on.
Oh, okay, got it. Great, thank you.
All right.
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions? All right, if there's no other questions, I will seek an introduction. Who would like to introduce tonight?
I'll introduce.
Introduced by the Vice President. And Madam Law Director, correct me, but this will come back at the 25th as a public hearing?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. Our next item under the agenda is an emergency. This is Ordinance 2022-30. This is establishing a 6-month moratorium on establishment or commencement of inpatient or outpatient addiction treatment facilities within the city of Xenia. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to sort of gear this introduction to cover both item D here as well as item E because they are presented in conjunction. With that being said, we're all aware of the growing national drug addiction crisis that has necessitated expansion of treatment services in communities across our country, and unfortunately our community is no exception to that. In Ohio, county seat communities are often viewed as ideal locations for such treatment facilities, given that the concentration of social services in those county functions, often needed by these individuals suffering from addictive behaviors, lends to individuals residing in the county, within our county seat for convenience. This co-location has been our local experience here in Xenia, as we've seen increased interest from a range of drug rehab services looking to operate in our community. It is sadly necessary that we have these services conveniently located in our community, and presently zoning for this type of treatment center would categorize them the same as medical offices, nursing homes, things of that nature. The code simply does not distinguish between other types of in and outpatient services and these types of detox or treatment facilities, despite the fact that most of us would view a difference in the nature of the services. We suggest that the council look at implementing the moratorium based on feedback from the council, and based on what we're seeing in terms of the frequency of request for whether or not new projects could be properly zoned in our community for the expansion of these services. And yet in doing so, we recognize that this is an important service and we want to be very thoughtful, very pragmatic about any changes that we would recommend pursuing for council. We are recommending two pieces of legislation this evening. Ordinance 2022-30 is presented as an emergency. Subsequently, in agenda item E under new business, we have Ordinance 2022-31. That's presented this evening as an introduction. What this would do is essentially, in conjunction, the two would establish a 6-month moratorium for any new detoxification types of centers in our community, which we think would give us sufficient time to evaluate, seek public input, bring legislation back to council for some changes to how we zone these types of facilities, and allow us to go through the typical legislative process to implement some changes. Under our new charter provisions, emergency ordinances automatically sunset after the 60th day.
Right.
And so to present this simply this evening as an emergency would only give us 2 months. And we think that given the legislative timeline and frankly the efforts that should be put into reviewing this, that we need more time than that. So we're requesting or recommending the emergency moratorium, which will allow us to immediately enact something for the 60 days, and then the subsequent legislation, which is 2022-31, to be introduced concurrently tonight with approval at your next meeting. After the proper procedure is met, then we would be able to extend that moratorium for the 6 months. Our city planner has already initiated some research into the topic, interesting findings, examples in other communities where they have more rigid zoning on these types of enterprises. And I want to be very clear, there's no attempt here by staff, and I'm speaking I think on behalf of council, to limit the ability of these service operations in our community. They are essential for helping people in need of treatment for addictive services. We're simply trying to determine where is the best location in our community that would minimize adverse effects to residents, to Central Business District, for example, and making sure that we are reflecting in our code and very clear and transparent about appropriate locations for these services. So again, this evening we're recommending 2 action items. The first as an emergency, requesting a vote. The second as an introduction, and the sum effect of that would be a 6-month moratorium on any new projects.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Merriman or Ms. Fisher regarding this? Councilman Scrivens?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. City Manager, with the existing structures that we have that are vacant, what would you propose to be the highest and best use to repurpose those facilities?
Yeah, there are some locations, in particular we have one not far from our hospital over on Monroe that is designed for some type of inpatient services. I think we would envision, I've said to council previously that there are some types of service delivery that, while not economically necessarily very valuable to the city, are still appropriate. It's an appropriately zoned and constructed facility. Elderly care, assisted living, there are a range of those types of care services that are perfectly appropriate. And I think from the staff perspective, from my perspective, those in nature are very different than a drug or alcohol rehab treatment facility, given the unique characteristics of the patients and the clients being served. So the existing locations that we have, I think there are some backfilling opportunities that would be viewed less negatively than some of these treatment services. And to be clear, we've had recent inquiries about other locations, even downtown here, for other types of inpatient or even outpatient treatment programs. So this is not a one-off issue. We are concerned about the frequency that we're seeing these requests. So we do have vacant spaces that can be backfilled for different purposes. I think that adds fuel to the fire and some urgency here that we look at this, and as a community and as a council have some discussion about what the pathway forward is.
Thanks, sir. Mr. President, also, I learned today that the county is moving to demolish the old Greenwood Manor, which, it's their property, but to me it'd be a senseless waste of already developed space for a purpose. But it's not my property, so.
Right.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Right, I would agree. I think there was some value in Greenwood Manor, but that's just my opinion. Vice President.
Sure. So I'm 100% in favor of us doing this at this time because we've got a lot of services that already exist in the city. And I think part of it is, I don't know that we've taken a good comprehensive look at what's available here and what's available in the county townships surrounding, and whether there is really an additional need for us to host that here. Well, one thing I would comment on is there is a group that's already stood up, has some endorsement from the county and the state level that's been looking at this, and that's the Greene County Drug-Free Coalition. And so they've been active for about 3 years now. And I think it would be good for us to go and address this question to them. And part of the reason I'm saying that is as they're operating and they're trying to encourage additional facilities to help with either inpatient or outpatient treatment going on, my sense is they're doing that without the municipality's input, whether that's us or Fairborn or Jamestown or Beaver Creek or anybody else. I doubt there's very much municipal input. And they're probably not thinking about the impact of the municipalities from that perspective. So their next meeting is September 8th, which is just a couple of weeks away. And I think it would be beneficial for us to invite ourselves or ask for an invitation to that meeting and to let them know that we're making, I'm assuming that we're going to vote in favor of this, that we've done this and the why we're doing this, and say as they're I think they're looking at the overall service structure of the county and trying to understand, whether there's sufficient, facilities, or whether they're encouraging other groups to come in, and let them know that we need to understand that before we're going to be receptive to other groups coming in here at this point. So,
no, I think that's a good point. I'm sure the city planner's taking a note on that. He and I have already talked about the value of seeking input from stakeholders, including existing treatment facilities and operators, to get some perspective from them. Again, we want to be very transparent, very communicative about this. There is unfortunately a marketplace driving the need in our community, in our region, in our state, and we want to accommodate that. We don't want to be the hub of all of that for a lot of obvious reasons. But I think it's important to look at not just at Xenia, but county-wide at where these services located. Is there a proper distribution? Why are we making some changes? We're just trying to limit the adverse effects while it's still providing access to that care in our community.
And it's interesting because on one hand there's been a lot of encouragement to the Emerge Center, and a lot of that is, at least from our perspective, been that it's fairly remote out in the township, and there's good reasons for folks that are residential programs to be separated from probably a community of foolishness that they've been involved with, from peer groups and those kind of things. But on the flip side, we've got another organization that has a men's residential treatment house here that's looking to move into the township, and the township they're moving into has been extremely resistant to them, to moving out into the township. And so I'm gonna encourage that group to go to the Greene County Drug-Free Coalition as well to discuss that, because we need to be thinking about, there's probably appropriate locations both within the city and within the townships where that makes sense and where it doesn't, and we all need to be getting behind where those locations are. So.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? All right, so first item is an emergency. We are first voting on Ordinance 2022-30. Do we have a motion to approve as an emergency?
I'll move.
Thank you. Moved by the Vice President as an emergency. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by the Mayor. Any additional comments? We'll seek a roll call, please, on the first item.
Vice President Urschel.
Aye.
Councilman Scrivens.
For 6 months, aye.
Councilwoman Dean.
Aye.
Councilman Branham.
Aye.
Mayor Mays.
Aye.
President Smith.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So our next item is Ordinance 2022-31. This will just be an introduction tonight, and this will actually extend the 60-day emergency that we just passed, even though it was titled 6 months. It was really just 60 days. And this will extend that 60 days to March 24th. Do we have, who would like to make that introduction tonight?
Mr. President, just a point of clarification. When we just passed 2022.30, it was for 6 months, right?
Well,
Or is that
technically,
60 days?
60
It
days.
says
It's
6
really
months on
60
here.
days, yes. It's technically just 60
Yeah, I think
days.
So then
Combination
the
of the
6
two
months
would
is
get-
in error?
No,
It's because it's an emergency.
What happens is it's a 6-month moratorium, but it can, by charter, can only be
60 days.
60 days.
This is emergency.
All right.
Because our emergency ordinance expires in 60
Very good.
days,
Thank
so
you, sir.
it's
Per the new charter changes.
kind of a loophole.
Correct.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Yep, all right, so this will be a blanket, actually, what we're passing next. Who would care to introduce?
I'll introduce.
Thank you. Introduced by Vice President Urschel, and that will come to us next meeting on August 25th. Will that require a public hearing as well? Thank you. All right. Next on our agenda is opportunity for appointed official reports. We'll start with Mr. Finance Director, Mr. Duke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to mention this evening, for those who are familiar with the council agenda, they may have noticed that the schedule of bills is not on this particular agenda, and that's because as a part of the charter amendments, it is no longer required to come before council for approval. So I wanted to mention that tonight. I also wanted to speak to the plan a little bit as far as what that will look like moving forward, and I had emailed council last week. I still believe it's important that council would see all of the expenditures of the city, and so my plan for communicating that to council would be to include a schedule of bills that would include an entire month worth of expenditures in my monthly report. And so, for example, you would see any of the expenditures from August in early September when I send out my monthly recap for the month of August. We also believe it's important that the public be able to see how their dollars are being spent. So we would make available that same schedule of bills to the public, just as it's available today on our website. It would be published each month, showing all the expenditures for the month, so that the public can view that for inspection. So they'd have a couple of ways the public would to see those expenditures on our website, and then we also are still participating in the Ohio checkbook. We don't update that quite as frequently as our schedule or as our website, but we will also be uploading all of those expenditures to the Ohio checkbook, so they'd be available there for review as well. So council and the public will both still be getting the same information, and it'll still be available. There just won't be a formal vote in the public meeting to approve paying those bills. So I wanted to discuss that, or to mention that tonight, because it is a little different than what we've experienced in the past.
All right, thank you. Any comments or questions for Mr. Duke tonight from council? All right, thank you. Thank you for that report. We'll go to Law Director. Thank you.
Legislative Review Committee, plan on a meeting on August 25th, 4 o'clock before our council meeting. We'll be reviewing the rewrite to the Finance Department chapter at that time. And I would also like to just give a gentle reminder to our council president. We still need you to formally make appointment of the new Economic Development Committee.
Okay, I apologize. I emailed that to our clerk.
We have to have you do it in a meeting.
Okay.
In an open session.
Do we need to do that tonight?
There's no
we can't proceed with that.
written legislation per the rules of charter. You just need to announce your appointments.
Okay, cool. So, actually appointed chair as Vice President Urschel. And the 3 committee members would be Urschel, myself, and the mayor. But the alternate would be Councilman Scrivens? Okay, Councilman Scrivens.
And that was all I had.
Okay, so I have a question for you. Our last planning and zoning meeting, we barely met a quorum. In fact, we actually had to wait for a member to come who was detained at work. We had talked once before about like super alternates, where we could have a alternate designation. Can we do that for planning and zoning?
I don't believe so. Planning and zoning is a charter-created commission, and it limits the number of members to 5. I don't know that now the chair does count towards the quorum, and we did in the charter change the number of voters. One of the things that I'm going to suggest when we do the next charter review, currently the Ohio Open Meetings Act requires you to be here in person. The issue with the Ohio Open Meetings Act is the state has not kept that legislation in line with the technology that we have today. It's just not. If you can Zoom into a meeting, you are actively participating, we can see you. Why do you physically need to be sitting in the chair? You're participating. So one of the things I'm going to recommend to Charter Review Commission to take a look at next time around is adding something like that. I think that would help solve a lot of these issues. But based on current charter language, I don't think we can appoint an alternate to planning and zoning.
Right. So I did explain to the 3 on planning and zoning that they did not all 3 have to vote affirmative for passage. It only took majority, which would be 2 of the 3.
It's a majority
Okay.
of the members present.
Okay. So
if you had 3 there,
Correct.
you need the vote of 2.
Okay,
Affirmative
so
vote of 2.
we would have only had 2 members that night, and I chaired that. Would we been able to conduct business?
If they voted 1-1, you would vote. You could be the tie.
Okay, so we could have passed.
But
Okay.
they would have had a quorum with 2?
Or 3.
The chair counts towards the quorum.
No, it doesn't.
He counts toward the quorum?
Yes.
Under the new language.
So chair of planning and zoning gets to vote? Or
Chair,
does not?
you count the chairperson, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but the
Case
change
time.
we, did we leave?
Sorry to throw this at you.
The change we made to the charter, because we were running into this issue, is that a quorum is considered, let me find it for you here. A quorum includes the chair, I believe. No, we didn't do that. A majority of the voting members of each board, commission, or committee. So you would have to have 3 voting members to have a quorum.
Okay, so it would have took 3, so we did. Okay, so does chair break ties?
You wouldn't, yeah, but unless, now you could have a situation where you have a quorum, you have 3 voting members, you have 1 vote yes, 1 vote no, and 1 abstains. So the abstention doesn't count as any type of vote at all.
Yeah.
It's not a negative, it's not a positive vote. So in that case, you would have a 1-to-1 vote.
Yeah.
And in that case, the chair could
The
vote to
chair
break
does
that
vote.
tie.
Okay, all right. Is that the impression you were under?
Yeah,
when you
then if
chaired?
there's 4, 2 and 2, 2 no, 2 yes, then you would
Okay.
still vote, you would
Okay,
get to vote.
so in any of other committees, say like BZA, does chair vote on that as well?
It would be the same for
Same-
planning
same-
commission and
Only a
BZA, yeah.
tiebreaker?
Yeah, only tiebreaker.
Okay, got it.
And then there was also changes as well with that new code that there's no longer, I can't fulfill, if you're absent, I can't fill the chair seat. It's gotta go to the vice. So it would be Faith in your case,
And that's effective when? The last charter?
the last charter changes.
Okay, great.
Citizen.
Okay, all right, thank you. Makes sense though.
Changes, you know what I mean?
That's what they're for.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Well, you've always had for those 2 boards and commissions, planning commission and BZA, you have a council person chair, but then and the charter said there was to be an alternate, the old charter, but then you also always had the election of a vice chair, which if there's an alternate, what's that vice chair ever gonna do or ever chair a meeting? So that is why the Charter Review Commission recommended getting rid of that council alternate for chair, so that the vice chair could step in.
Yeah, I just, for the sake of government being effective and not canceling meetings, I know we have a lot of volunteers that sit on commissions. Some of them work 2 jobs, some have family obligations, you have COVID, you have other issues of absences. I would like to see us have some provision to take care of that so we can move the agenda forward. That's why I've always been an advocate for alternates or super delegates, anybody that could sit in that could be appointed by council. Maybe it's a former mayor, maybe it's a council member with experience. Is that something that Charter Review could look at?
I think the next time the Charter Review Commission meets, we could certainly discuss adding alternates
Right.
To those 5-member boards. And that was one of the things that we had reviewed with the committee. The city planner and I had actually recommended increasing the number on those boards to 7, in the hopes that that would get you more people. Ultimately, Charter Review Commission did not agree with that recommendation, which was absolutely their right. But I think we could look next time around about increasing the numbers on that board. If you have 7 instead of 5, you've got more chance, I think, of meeting your quorum. We could look at what Charter Review about having alternates for those. And I think we also have the discussion, not just for the boards and commissions, but for this council, about allowing participation via Zoom or some other type of video platform.
So if you established a 7-member commission, what determines quorum? Is that just Robert's rules?
Your quorum would be 4.
Or is that in our charter? Is that Robert's rules? Or who determines that? To me, if you had 7 and you had 3, you can break a tie.
Your quorum typically is a majority. One of the things we could change too, and I thought we had done this, and I apologize, that's why we misstated it, but one of the things we had talked about as well was allowing the chair to count towards the quorum, which, ultimately Charter Review didn't agree with that either.
Okay.
So it's definitely, I think with the changes we made with the charter, we addressed the issue about majority vote. Because the old charter language was you had to have 3 members voting in favor. You had to have your entire quorum voting in favor to pass anything. So we got past that, but yeah, there probably are still some issues with how those boards function that your next Charter Review Commission will want them to take a look at that.
All right, thank you very much. Just not to beat a dead horse, it's just kind of embarrassing for the city to have to cancel a meeting of say planning and zoning when you got a developer there willing to invest millions of dollars and you just don't have enough people tonight, so come back in 2 weeks or a month. Just my opinion.
Mr. President?
Well, you also have the authority as council, if you have any members that are repeatedly and consistently missing meetings, you can remove that member and appoint someone else.
No, actually 2 that missed have never missed, so it was just a fluke. But normally people know they're going to miss a meeting and maybe a month in advance or 2 weeks because of vacations or something. So to me, that's where you pick up that phone and you set that super alternate to come and cover. That's
definitely something we can look at next charter review.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
I'm just going to add, given the persistent nature of this problem of maintaining volunteers on our boards and commissions, I think it's something that future charter review and council are going to have to think about, because to your point, it is beginning to impede the business of the city. And we're asking for volunteers to come out and participate, and that's a big commitment. And it's getting very hard to find the folks who are willing to make that commitment.
So in the case of planning and zoning, rather than cancel all those agenda items and reschedule 30 days out, can those items come to council and then we vote and because obviously we'll have a meeting within 2 weeks prior to that. Could council approve those necessary items and skip the process?
I think it would depend on the items. Some of those things you might be able to say in the land development code, there was no thing, they move on. What we said for council or for planning and zoning commission basically is that they shall perform all duties assigned to it by city council. Related to planning or regulation of the growth, development, platting, subdivision, or land use of the city. So it's not specifically in the charter, hey, you have to make a recommendation on where you've set that, hey, you have to make a recommendation on a rezoning, you have to make a recommendation on a plat. You've set that by ordinance, which is the land development code. So, yeah, we could potentially look at tweaking the land development code if planning and zoning, or you may have an issue. You know, if you have a quorum of 3 and you have 2 abstain because they have a conflict, you're not gonna get it passed.
Right.
You're not gonna, because that's only 1 voting,
Right.
which isn't, you know, so, yeah, I think maybe as we look more, there's some other tweaks we've talked about to the land development code that may be needed. That's definitely something we can look at.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, anyone else have anything for Ms. Fisher tonight?
Just want to say congratulations on getting the charter passed, and for the charter committee that put all the time, that both here from our council and the citizens. And I think it was an 87% approval rating, if I remember correct. And so step 2 is done. We got one more step here in November. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. The last batch will be in November. Now, that will update the entire charter except for, if you will recall, we pulled Article 11, which was the election chapter, because it was so related. We also pulled Article 12, which was the initiative and referendum. Council wasn't really comfortable with the recommendations the Charter Review Commission had made on those. So the next time you appoint a Charter Review Commission, we will ask them to take a look at those articles again.
Great.
All right, thank you. Anyone else have anything? All right, thanks, Ms. Fisher. Appreciate that. All right, our next appointed official report would come from our city manager, Mr. Merriman.
I've already talked a lot tonight, so I'm going to keep this very brief. It's just a reminder that before our next council meeting, we already have actually now a couple local schools back in session. Most schools will be in the process of being back in session when you next assemble, so we are encouraging folks to be mindful of that. Your morning and afternoon traffic patterns will change a little bit with increased school traffic on the roadways. Xenia PD will be out in force, enforcing our school zones, as well as making sure that folks are not passing school buses and so forth. So please make an extra effort to keep our students safe. Be mindful of those traffic changes as we get into the fall here. That's it.
All right, thank you. And if I understand right, there is going to be construction changes and patterns of traffic at Warner?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we would encourage you to check out Xenia Community Schools website. They've been in coordination with Police Division and the city with that as well, but please make sure you're aware of those changes as the construction is commencing over there.
Right, all right, thank you very much. Anyone have anything for the city manager tonight? All right, moving on to council comments and reports. We'll start with Councilwoman Dean.
Nothing done.
All right, thank you very much. Councilman Scrivens.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few items. The Greene County Fair, I think, was successful this year. I want to thank everybody who participated in that. I personally was there 2 nights, and I really enjoyed it. I don't think it was as many people attended this year as it did last year, was it?
No,
Not the 2 nights I was there, but I thought overall it was a very good fair, and I was glad to go to the Greene County Fair this year. Also, Mr. President, I'd like to call the attention to the Public Service Department that we have weeds growing in our esplanades. Example, going out North Detroit to turn on Fairground Road. We got a forest right in the middle of the street. We need to get somebody out there with an edger and get these weeds out the esplanade. Also, in front of the Chamber of Commerce, the esplanade there, church, and it's ridiculous. I mean, coming down the hill from 35 into Xenia right there from Donato's, Domino's down to, it's ridiculous. I mean, who is responsible? That's the question. And if no one's responsible, then Councilman Urschel and I will have to assume an initiative to get something done. That's obviously not getting done by our paid employees. For the life of me, I can't understand why we can't have a couple of interns during the summer doing yard work. I mean, whatever happened to that? Enough said. I want to thank the Xenia community for passing phase 2 of the charter review. thank you for your insight and for your vote. Your vote was resounding. It told us that we're on board with you and you're on board with us, and we appreciate that. And then finally, Mr. President, I'd like to have the chief in his new capacity, maybe in the next month or so, to call a school security meeting with all the guys and all. We want to make sure that we don't come out looking like other communities. We want to be ahead of the curve. We want everybody to know what they're supposed to do, and then if they have to, then do it. I'd like to see the Public Safety Committee get involved with that within the next 30 to 60 days.
We'll be making a report
I'll be
on that
reaching
actually
out
next
to the
week.
chief to see if we can coordinate some type of activity to show that we're in front of the curve and not behind the curve. With that, Mr. President, I yield back. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman Scrivens. And I believe you have had some meetings and interaction with our school assistants.
Yeah, we have our Public Safety Committee meeting next week. That's one of our agenda items.
Very good. All right, thank you. Thank you. Next will be Councilman Brianna.
Yeah, well, just one quick thing, thoughts and prayers to Officer Burton from the Richmond Police Department, in Indiana. I'm getting tired of saying this every single council meeting. I think this will make the third one, in a row. So I hate that the, dynamics of our communities are turning to this, which is, it's ridiculous, it's sad. So thoughts and prayers with that, police department and those citizens in that local community.
All right, thank you. Do we have an update on her condition?
Critical condition.
Okay.
Yep.
No change since yesterday?
Correct.
All right, thank you. Very sad. Super sad. All right, we'll go next to the mayor.
Also wanted to thank our community for the passage of our charter amendments, and a lot of work that went into that, so thank you. We're excited for one last vote in November, and I was excited by the amount of people that actually said to me, I read through all of those changes and thanked us for making those available. I just had a couple things that I had an opportunity to participate in. The last weekend of July, had a chance to bring greetings to the Wilberforce Alumni Weekend and thank people for coming to the community and just kick that weekend off. It was a lot of fun. I had MVRPC on the 4th, and they had a lovely breakfast on the Riverscape in the pavilion, and that was a good morning. We also, the two chiefs, myself and Mr. Merriman, had a meeting with Mr. Duffy from the Kettering Health Group. I've mentioned him before. He's the director of the mission and ministry at Kettering. So he's working on a community health assessment, community health needs. Just really excited about the way he's involving Xenia and our leadership and seeing what would actually be beneficial here and ways we can participate in that. So we've got a few other meetings that we're setting up with him, and just want to thank him for coming out and thank our chiefs for participating in that. On this past Tuesday, we had the swearing in of our newest officer, Jeremiah Fernbaugh. Is that right, Fernbaugh? Okay, so it's good to see that. Meet his wife Nikki and their 3 boys and welcome them to the Xenia family. Just a reminder about this Sunday at 10:30 at Shawnee Park is a community worship service. About 15 churches are participating in this, and we're gonna all be meeting at the park for church, and very excited to see that come together. So I hope that people come. There's gonna be chairs available. You can bring your long chairs as well, but there are chairs at the pavilion. So again, it's 10:30 at Shawnee Park on Sunday, and that's all I have.
All right, thank you very much, Mayor Mays. Next, we'll turn to Vice President Urschel.
We had an opportunity to meet with the Public Services and Utilities Committee, and really productive session. So I just want to thank the staff for the preparation and time, and we went over quite a number of items. We're going to be having a new refuse contract, so we looked over the bids that were being proposed to the city, and those will be brought back to the council, the recommendation here to the council as well. We looked at, had an update on the aggregation for natural gas. As you know, our aggregate supplier had gone out of business, and so we'll be coming back, or the staff will be coming back with a recommendation for an aggregate proposal here before winter time, and that'll be timely for us to get that back. Once again, if as long as you have not set a contract in the city, you will be automatically switched over to our aggregate supplier. And if you wish to opt out, you can opt out if you choose to. But if you have not set up a contract, then if you want to go to the aggregate supplier, you will have to negotiate out of that contract that you've set to go to the aggregate supplier. So that's in the works as well. I did a review of where we are with our stormwater assessment methodology, and most needed for us to fund numbers of improvements for the stormwater removal systems in the city, and more to come on that. But it looks like we have a really good analytical basis for how we're going to do that assessment, and we'll be coming back with the staff and the Public Service Utilities Committee with some specific recommendations back to council probably in the winter spring timeframe for that. And then we also looked at, once again, there's a number of stormwater removal channels that are with private property right now. And we as a city don't necessarily have easements, but we reviewed what rights we have if there's an emergency issue where we have to remove debris that's backing up stormwater. So that was good to go over that as well too. Good news is we're going to be doing some city crack sealing on the city roads. Hooray. And that's going to get initiated, and it was just good news from the public service folks that'll be happening this fall. And one other item, we'd had some discussions before about just how we do our, as you've noticed in our council meetings, we've had a number of lighting assessment districts approved. Right now, the principal commercial areas or residential areas that are outside of the lighting contractor are on West 2nd and West 3rd Street. So we had some really good discussion about the fact that in times past, the city had put in historical lighting with those districts, but it's very difficult to maintain those at this point, and parts just are not available. So just want to thank the city engineer for taking a hard look at that, and we may be moving away from the historical nature of some of those fixtures to some that'll be more maintainable, and potentially even going back, getting those into the aggregate lighting contract as well too. But more to come on that as well. And I just, once again, like the mayor said, to my knowledge and to the knowledge of all the pastors I've talked to, we've never had a community-wide worship time in our city that's going to be attended by so many churches. We've had 2 or 3 churches that have gotten together in the summertime to worship, but we've got 15 different churches and assemblies that are not going to be meeting by themselves, and they've chosen to meet as an aggregation here, and it goes across 10 different denominations. We've got churches in the north, south, east, and west side of the cities. Got the Xenia Area Association of Churches and Ministries endorsing this, and the African American Ministerial Alliance. And as one of our pastors said, he's just looking to come to see God smile with us, that we're coming together as the body of Christ that morning. So I would encourage you, and we're not looking to draw anyone away from their specific congregation. So if you have a congregation, this might be a good day just to come down to the park at 10:30. There's going to be handicapped parking around the park. We've got parking in the school system has authorized us to park over the ball field and at the
Benner Fieldhouse.
Benner Fieldhouse, thank you.
Masonic Lodge and
the city parking.
Xenia Grace will be doing shuttle services.
Yeah, we'll have
so
shuttle service as well, so you don't have to walk. So just a lot of good stuff. So we're going to be honored to have Dr. White from Cedarville University be our speaker that morning as well too, to come and share with us. So just would encourage folks to, if you can be with us, great. And if you can't, pray for us that morning. And just looking forward to being together as a community. That's all I have.
So that's at 10:30.
10:30.
So you would encourage people to probably arrive between 10 and 10:15 to catch the shuttle?
Yeah. So I would say.
Okay. And if they catch a shuttle, where will they catch the shuttle?
So once again, we'll over at the parking behind the Benner Fieldhouse, if you had to park over there, or the city lot here over by the senior center, or we're also going to be doing shuttle over at the Xenia Square. So if folks have to park over there, we'll be driving around over there as well too, to get it. I'm thinking we're going to have at least 1,000 folks there, if not more. So, yeah.
All right. very good. All right, anyone have anything for the Vice President tonight? All right, so just one thing real quick. I'd like to thank our police chief for being here tonight at several meetings. As our Sergeant at Arms, thank you so much for being here, and the work that your department does for our community. We cannot thank you enough, especially in the times that we have. Yes, and just to let you know, we had a planning and zoning meeting on July 7th. We had a couple cases. The first was the Land Development Code text amendment changes that we voted on tonight. Two other cases. One was a final plat for Edenbridge, Section 2, which is almost a 6-acre subdivision with additional 10 single-family homes, 6 duplex lots, and 2 open spots. And then a final plat PUD at Right Cycle Estates. So really, that's going to be a 10-acre subdivision with an additional 26 single-family homes and a common area. This is a testimony to our community that we are a very affordable and safe community. And as we've seen our neighbor Beaver Creek build out to the point where they're about finished, we knew that it was time for people to choose Xenia as their home, and we welcome them. And we're looking forward to these communities being built. And as Xenia has a reputation to be an affordable place to live, you get more for your money here when it comes to housing. And we do have educational choices in our community with a few charter schools or public schools and private schools as well. So next, we do have a request from city staff for an executive session. This will be for the purchase or sale of property per Ohio Revised Code 121.22. I'll make the motion to move into executive. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by the mayor. Any discussion? All right. Before we do roll call, for those that are watching, we will come out of executive session. We do not plan to have any vote. Okay, so the cameras will come off as we adjourn. Can I get a roll call, please?
Vice President Herschel?
Aye.
Councilman Scrivens?
Aye.
Councilwoman Dean? Aye. Councilman Branham?
Aye.
Mayor Mays?
Aye.
President Smith?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you for watching.
Good night.